Oh, forget it, Boyle. You just like have angels fly out of your arses get next to the likes of her.
Rose, you're no picnic. All right, you're a spoiled little brat even. But under that, you're the most amazingly astounding, wonderful girl, woman that I've ever known.
Where to, miss?
To the stars. I'm flying. Jack.
Iceberg, right ahead! On the starboard, starboard!
In this video, we will dive into the movie Titanic, released in 1997. We will discuss the movie story, summarize the plot, and explore the cast and characters. Additionally, we will cover the movie production details and box office performance. Finally, we will provide the reviews and personal reactions. Let's begin with the movie story. Titanic is a 1997 epic romance, drama, and disaster film starring Leonardo DiCaprio, Kate Winslet, and Billy Zane. It was directed by James Cameron. It was a fictionalized account of the sinking of the RMS Titanic and followed the forbidden romance of a beautiful first-class woman, Kate Winslet, and a penniless third-class artist, Leonardo DiCaprio, aboard the ill-fated maiden voyage of the RMS Titanic. The film also stars Kathy Bates, Francis Fisher, Gloria Stuart, Bernard Hill, Jonathan Haidt, Victor Garber, David Warner, Danny Nucci, Susie Ames, and Bill Paxton. Cameron saw the love story as a way to engage the audience with the real-life tragedy. In 1995, production began on the film when Cameron shot footage of the actual Titanic wreck. The modern scenes were shot on board the aquamatic Masterfully dish, which Cameron used as a base while filming the actual wreck. A reconstruction of the Titanic was built in Baja California at Playas de Rosarito. Scale models and CGI effects were also used to create a more realistic version of the ship. The film was partially funded by Paramount Pictures and 20th Century Fox, its distributors. At the time, it was the most expensive film ever made with an estimated budget of $200 million. In 2009, James Cameron's Avatar, the first film Cameron had made since Titanic, topped Titanic, however. The film was originally scheduled to open on July 2, 1997, however, post-production delays pushed back its release to December 19 instead. Titanic was an enormous critical and commercial success. It was nominated for 14 Academy Awards, eventually winning 11, including Best Picture and Best Director. In 2012, the film was re-released to theaters in 3D. In 1996, treasure hunter Brock Lovett and his team explored the wreck of the RMS Titanic, searching for a necklace called the Heart of the Ocean. They believe the necklace is in Caledon, Carl Hockley's safe, which they discover. Instead of the diamond, they find a sketch of a nude woman wearing it, dated April 14, 1912, the night the Titanic hit the iceberg. Rose Dawson Calvert learns after trying, contacts Lovett and tells him that she is the woman depicted. She and her granddaughter Elizabeth Lizzie Calvert visit Lovett and his team on the salvage ship. When asked if he knows the whereabouts of the necklace, Rose recalls her memories abroad and the Titanic, revealing that she was Rose, a passenger believed to have died in the sinking. In 1912, the upper-class Rose boards the ship in Southampton, England, and her fiancé Carl, the son of a Pittsburgh steel tycoon, and her mother, Rose DeWitt Bukater. Carl and Ruth stress the importance of Rose's engagement because the marriage will solve the Bukater's financial problems. Distraught by her engagement to Carl and the pressure her mother is putting on her, Rose considered suicide by jumping off the stern of the ship before she leaves. A drifter and artist named Jack Dawson intervenes and discourages her from jumping overboard. Jack and Rose develop a tentative friendship. Carl and Ruth prevent Rose from seeing Jack. She defies them, meets Jack at the bow of the ship, and realizes that she prefers him over Carl. They go to Rose's stateroom and she asks Jack to sketch her wearing nothing but the heart of the ocean and engagement present from Carl. Afterwards, they flee Carl's bodyguard Spicer Lovejoy into the ship's cargo hold, where they make love, and then to the ship's forward well deck. where they observe the ship's collision with an iceberg and overhear the ship's officer, including Edward John Smith and designer Thomas Andrews, discussing its seriousness. Rose tells Jack they should warn her mother and Carl. Carl discovers Jack trying and a note in his safe along with the necklace, so he has the heart of the ocean slips into Jack's coat pocket, forming him for stealing it. Jack is arrested, brought to the master at arms office, and handcuffed to a pipe. Carl puts the necklace in his coat but later gives the coat and unwittingly the necklace to Rose. Rose runs away from Carl and her mother, who has boarded a lifeboat to break Jack from and an ox. Jack and Rose struggle back to the deck where Carl and Jack encourage her to board another lifeboat. Carl, claiming that he has made an arrangement that will allow both men to get off safely. After she boards, Carl double crosses Jack, realizing that she should not leave Jack. Rose reunites with him back on board Titanic. Infuriated, Carl steals a pistol from Lovejoy and pursues them into the floating first class dining saloon. After using up the ammunition, Carl returns to the boat deck and boards a lifeboat by pretending to look after an abandoned child. As Jack and Rose return to the top deck, the lifeboats have all departed and passengers are falling to their death. The two take refuge on the stand as the ship sinks first until they are pulled into the ocean. Jack finds Rose in the water and leads her to a wall panel. He then helps Rose onto the wall panel, then can only support one person's weight. As he hangs onto the panel, he assures her that she will not die there and will instead die an old woman, warm in her bed. Jack eventually dies from hypothermia. With a rescue boat returned to the side of the sinking, Rose blows a whistle taken from the uniform of a nearby deceased officer and is delivered by the RMS Carpathia to New York, where she lists her name as Rose Dawson. Hidden, she evides Carl for the final time on Carpathia's deck as he is searching for her. Old Rose mentions that Carl eventually committed suicide after losing his fortune in 1929 due to the Wall Street crash and subsequent Great Depression. Her story complete, Rose goes alone to the stern of lower ships. There she pursues the heart of the ocean and drops it into the ocean. Later, while seemingly asleep in her bed, the photos of her days surround her, a visual chronic that she lived the life she wanted with Jack. The young Rose is then seen reuniting with Jack at the grand staircase of the rejuvenated Titanic, cheered and congratulated by those who perished on the ship. Fictional characters: Leonardo DiCaprio as Jack Dawson. Cameron said he needed the cast to feel as though they were really on the Titanic, relieved its liveliness, and to take that energy and give it to Jack. He is an artist who is able to have his heart shown within the film. Jack is portrayed as a penniless, disconsolate man who has toured numerous parts of the world, including Paris. He wins two tickets on to the RMS Titanic in a poker game and travel as third-class passenger with his friend Fabrizio. He is attracted to Rose at first sight and meets her when she attempts to throw herself off the stern of the ship. This enables him to mix with the first-class passenger for a night. When casting the role, various established actors including Matthew McConaughey, Chris O'Donnell, Billy Crudup, and Stephen Dorff were considered. Tom Cruise expresses an interest in portraying the character, though his superstar asking price was never taken seriously. DiCaprio, 22 years old at the time, was brought to camera's attention by casting director Mel Finn. Initially, he refuses to portray the character and refuses to read his first romantic scene on the set. Cameron said he read it once, then started goofing around, and I could never get him to focus on it again. But for one split second, a shaft of light came down from the heavens and lit up the forest. Cameron strongly believed in DiCaprio's acting ability and told him, "Look, I am not going to make this guy brooding and neurotic. I am not going to give him a tick and a limp and all the things you want." Cameron rather envisioned the character as a James Stewart type. Kate Winslet as Rose. Cameron said Winslet had the thing that you look for and that there was a quality in her face, in her eyes, that she just knew people would be ready to go the distance with her. Rose is a 17 years old girl originally from Philadelphia who is forced into an engagement to 30 years old Caledon hockey so she and her mother Ruth can maintain their high class status after her father's death had left the family debt ridden. Rose boarded the RMS Titanic with Carl and Ruth as a first class passenger and meets Jack. Winslet said of her character, "She has got a lot to give and she has got a very open heart and she wants to explore and adventure the world, but that's not going to happen." Gavin Peltrow. Claire Danes and Gabrielle Anwar had been considered for the role when they turned it down. 22 years old Winslet campaigned heavily for the role. She sent Cameron daily notes from England, which led Cameron to invite her to Hollywood for audition. As with DiCaprio, casting director Mel Finn originally brought her to Cameron's attention. When looking for a Rose, Cameron described the character as an Audrey Hepburn type and was initially uncertain about casting Winslet even after her screen test impressed him. After she screen tested with DiCaprio, Winslet was so thoroughly impressed with him that she whispered to Cameron, "He's great even if you don't pick me, pick him." Winslet sent Cameron a single rose with a cork sign from Your Rose and lobby him by phone. "You don't understand," she pleaded one day when she receives him by mobile phone in his home. "I am Rose. I don't know why you are even seeing anyone else." Her presences as well as her talent eventually convinced him to cast her in the role. Titanic 1997 cameos. Several crew members of the Academic appears in the film, including Anatoly, creator and pilot of the Mr. Deep submergence vehicle, Andrew Fox. Pre-production. The story could not have been written better. The juxtaposition of rich and poor, the gender roles played out onto death, the asceticism and nobility of the bygone age, the magnificence of the great ship matched in scale only by the fury of the man who drove her hell-bent through the darkness, and above all, the lesson that life is uncertain, the future unknowable, the unthinkable possible. James Cameron. James Cameron had a fascination with shipwreck, and for him the RMS Titanic was the Mount Everest of shipwreck. He was almost past the point in his life when he felt he could consider an undersea expedition, but he has said still had a mental reluctance to live with the life I had turned my back on when I switched from the science to the art in college. So when an IMAX movie was made from footage shot of the wreck itself, he decided to seek Hollywood funding to pay for an expedition and do the same thing. "It was not because I particularly wanted to make the movie," Cameron has said. "I wanted to dive the shipwreck." Harland and Wolff, the RMS Titan's builder, opened their private archive to the crew, sharing blueprints that were thought lost from the ship's interior. Production designer Peter Lamson team looked for artifacts from the era. However, the newness of the ship meant every prop had to be made from scratch. Fox acquired 40 acres of waterfront south of Place de Rosarito in Mexico and began building a new studio on May 31, 1996. Production. The modern day scenes of the expedition were shot on the academic Musty left Gladys in July 1996. Principal photography for Titanic began in September 1996 at the newly built Fox Plaza Studios. The poop deck was built on a hinge which could rise from 0 to 90 degrees in a few seconds as the ship's stern rose during the sinking. For the safety of the stuntmen, many props were made of foam rubber. By November 15, the boarding scenes were being shot. Cameron chose to build his RMS Titanic on the starboard side as a study of weather data showed prevailing north to south wind which blew the funnel smoke aft. This posed a problem for shooting the ship's departure from Southampton as it was docked on its port side. Any writing on props and costumes had to be reserved, and if someone walked to their right in the script, they had to walk left during shootings. In post production, the film was flipped to the correct direction. A full time etiquette coach was hired to instruct the cast on the manners of the upper class hospitality in 1912. Despite this, several critics picked up on a anachronism in the film, not least involving the two main stars. Cameron stacks Jack's portrait of Rose for a scene which he feels he has the backdrop of repression. You know what it means for her, the freedom she must be feeling. It's kind of exhilarating for the reason he said the scene was DiCaprio and Winslet first seen together. It wasn't by any kind of design, although I could not have designed it better. There's a nervousness and energy and a hesitance, and then Cameron stated they had rehearsals together but they had not shoot anything together. If I'd had a choice, I probably would have preferred to put it deeper into the body of the shot. He said he and his crew were just trying to find things to shoot because the big set was not yet ready. It was not ready for a month. So we were scrambling around trying to fill in anything we could get to shoot. After seeing the scene unfilmed, Cameron felt it worked out considerably well. Effect. Cameron wanted to push back the boundary of special effect with his film and enlisted Digital Domain to continue the developments in digital technology which the director pioneered while working on The Abyss and Terminator 2 Judgment Day. Many previous films about the RMS Titanic shot water in slow motion which did not look wholly convincing. He encouraged them to shoot their 45-foot long miniature of the ship as if we are making a commercial of the White Star Line afterwards. Digital water and smoke were added as were extras captured on a motion capture stage. Visual effect supervisor Rob Ledge to scan the faces of many actors including himself and his children. There was a crucial historical fact Cameron chose to omit from the film. The ship that was close to the Titanic but had turned off its radio for the night and did not hear their SOS calls. Yes, Californian. This was not a compromise to mainstream filmmaking. That was really more about emphasis creating an emotional truth to the film, stated Cameron. He said there were aspects of retelling the sinking that seems important in pre and post production but turned out to be less important as the film evolved. The story of the Californian was in there. We even shot a scene of them switching off their Merconi radio set, said Cameron, but I took it out. It was a clear cut because it focuses you back into the world. If Titanic is powerful as a metaphor, as a microcosm for the end of the world in a sense, then that world must be self contained. The soundtrack album for Titanic was composed by James Horner for the vocals he had throughout the film, subsequently described by Errol Hitcher of the Wall Street Journal as evocative. Horner chose Norwegian singer Sissel Kyrkjebø, better known as Sissel. Horner knew Sissel from her album Intent Isolation and he particularly liked how she sang. He had tried 25 or 30 singers before he finally chose Sissel as the voice to create specific mood within the film. Paramount Picture and 20th Century Fox financed Titanic and expected Cameron to complete the film for a release on July 2, 1997. The film was to be released on this date in order to explore the lucrative summer season ticket sales when blockbuster films usually do better. In April, Cameron said the film's special effects were too complicated and that releasing the film for summer would not be possible. With production delays, Paramount pushed back the release date to December 19, 1997. This fueled speculation that the film itself was a disaster. However, a preview screening in Minneapolis on July 14 generated positive reviews, and chatters on the internet was responsible for more favorable word of mouth about the film. This eventually led to more positive media coverage. The film premiered on November 1, 1997 at the Tokyo International Film Festival, where reaction was described as tepid by the New York Times. However, positive reviews stated to appear back in the United States. The official Hollywood premiere occurred on December 14, 1997, where the big movie stars who attended the opening were enthusiastically gushing about the film to the world media. The film received steady audience after opening in North America on Friday, December 1997. By the end of that same week, theaters were beginning to sell out. The film earned 86 on its opening day and $28 million over the opening weekend from theaters average to about $10,710 per venue and ranking number 1 at the box office ahead of the 18 James Bond film. Tomorrow Never Dies by New Year's Day. Titanic had made over $120 million, had increased its popularity and theater continued to sell out. Its biggest single day took place on Saturday, February 14, 1998, making $130 million more than 6 weeks after it debuted in North America. It stayed at number 1 for 15 consecutive weeks in the United States and Canada, which remains a record for any film. By March 1998, it was the first film to earn more than $1 billion worldwide. The film stayed in theater in North America for almost 10 months before finally closing on Thursday, October 1, 1998, with a final domestic gross of $600 million. Box Office Mojo estimated that after adjusting for ticket price inflation, Titanic would be the sixth highest grossing film of all time in the United States and Canada. The film made double its domestic amount overseas, generating an international gross of 124 and accumulating a grand total of 184 worldwide. It became the highest grossing film in history and remained so for 12 years until Avatar, also written and directed by Cameron, surpasses it in 2010. Before its release, various film critics predicted the film would be a significant disappointment at the box office, especially due to it being the most expensive film ever made at the time. When it was shown to the press in Atman of 1997, it was a massive foreboding since the people in charge of the screenings believed they were on the verge of losing their jobs. Because of this creates albatross of a picture on which finally two studios had to combine to share the great lead of its making. Cameron also thought he was headed for disaster at one point during filming. He labored the last 6 months on Titanic in the absolute knowledge that the studio would lose $100 million. It was a certainty, he stated, as the film neared release. Particular venom was spotted at Cameron for what was seen as his hubris and monumental extravagance. A film critic for the Los Angeles Times wrote that Cameron's overweening pride has come close to capsizing this project and that the film was a handed completely derivative copy of old Hollywood romance. When the film became a success with an unprecedented box office performance, it was credited as the love story stole the world's heart. The first batch of people to see it gobsmacked by the sheer scale and intimacy of the production. Cameron explained the film's success as having significantly benefited from the experience of sharing When people have an experience that very powerful in the movie theater, they want to go share it. They want to grab their friend and bring them so that they can enjoy it, he said. They want to be the person to bring them the news that this is something worth having in their life. That's how Titanic worked. Media Awareness Network stated the normal repeat viewing rate of a blockbuster theatrical film is about 5%. The repeat rate for Titanic was over 20%. The box office receipts were even more impressive when factoring in the film's 3 hour and 14 minutes length meant that it could only be shown 3 times a day compared to a normal movie 4 showings. In response to this, many theaters started midnight showing and were rewarded with fill houses until almost 3 to 30 a.m. The film garnered mostly positive reviews from film critics. Review aggregator website Rotten Tomatoes report the film as holding an overall 82% approval rating based on 97 reviews, with a rating average of 7.4 out of 10. The site's journal consensus in that film is mostly unqualified triumph for Cameron, who offered a dashing blend of spectacular visuals and old-fashioned melodrama. At Metacritic, which assign a vitamin rating out of 0 to 100 reviews from film critics, the film has a rating score of 74 based on 34 reviews, classifies as a generally favorable reviewed film. When regarding the film's overall design, Roger Ebert stated it is flawlessly crafted, intelligently constructed, strongly acted, and spellbinding. Movies like this are not merely difficult to make at all, but almost impossible to make well. He credited the technical difficulties with being so daunting that it's a wonder when the filmmakers are also able to bring the drama and history into proportion, and found convinced by both the story and the sad saga. It was named as his ninth best film of 1997. On the television program Siskel and Ebert, the film received 2 thumbs up and was praised for its accuracy in recreating the ship sinking. Abbott describes the film as a glorious Hollywood epic, well crafted and well worth the wait, and genius skill found Leonardo DiCaprio captivating. James Bradley stated malicious in detail yet vast in scope and intent. Titanic is the kind of epic motion picture image that has become a rarity. You don't just watch Titanic, you experience it. It was named his second best film of 1997. Elmer Hafildson of the BBC wrote that the sinking of the great ship is no secret, yet for many exceeds expectation in sheer scale and tragedy. At that, would you consider that it tops a bump numbing 3 hour running time, then she have a truly impressive feat of entertainment achieved by Cameron. Joseph McBride of Box Office Magazine concluded to describe Titanic as the greatest disaster movie ever made is to sell it short. James Cameron's recreation of the 1912 sinking of the unsinkable liner is one of the most significant pieces of serious popular entertainment ever to animate from Hollywood. The romantic and emotional charge aspect of the film were equally praised. Andrew L. Urban of Urban Sandfield said, "You will walk out of Titanic not talking about budget or running time, but of its enormous emotive power, big as the engine of the ship itself, determined as its giant propeller to gouge into your heart, and as lasting as the love story that propels it." Owen Gelberman of Entertainment Weekly described the film as a lush and terrifying spectacle of romantic doom. Writer-director James Cameron has restaged the defining catastrophe of the early 20th century on the human scale of such purified yearning and terror that the touches of the deepest level of popular movie making. Janet Maslin of the New York Times commented that Cameron's magnificent Titanic is the first spectacle in decades that honestly invites comparison to Gone with the Wind. Deckard Corsell of Time magazine, on the other hand, wrote mostly negative reviews criticizing the lack of interesting emotional elements. Like a great Aaron Finch's on the ocean floor, the Titanic faces still toward the west, interrupted forever on its only voyage. We see it in the opening shots of Titanic, encrusted with the slit of 85 years. A remote controlled TV camera sneaks its way inside, down corridors and through doorways, showing us staterooms built for millionaires and inherited by crustaceans. Those shots strike precisely the right note. The ship calls from its grave for its story to be told. And if the story is made of showbiz and hype, smoke, and mirrors, well, so was the Titanic. She was the largest moving work of man in all history, a character boast, neatly dismissing the pyramids and the Great Wall. There is a shot of her early in the film, weaving majestically beneath the camera from bow to stern, nearly 900 feet long and unsinkable. It was claimed until an iceberg made an irrefutable reply. James Cameron's 194-minute, $200 million film of the tragic voyage is in the tradition of the great Hollywood epics. It is flawlessly crafted, intelligently constructed, strongly acted, and spellbinding if its story stays well within the traditional formula for such picture. Well, you don't choose the most expensive film ever made as your opportunity to reinvent the wheel. We know before the movie begins that certain things must happen. We must see the Titanic sail and sink and be convinced that we are looking at a real ship. There must be a human story, probably a romance involving a few of the passengers. There must be Venice involving some of the rest, and a subplot involving the arrogance and pride of the ship's builders, and perhaps also their courage and dignity. And there must be a reenactment of the ship's terrible death theories. It took 2.5 hours to sink so that everyone aboard had time to know what was happening and to consider their actions. All of those elements are present in Cameron's Titanic, weighted and balanced like blocks so that the film always seems in proportion. The ship was made out of models, large and smart visual effects and computer animation. You know intellectually that you are not looking at a real ocean liner, but the illusion is convincing and seamless. The special effects don't call inappropriate attention to themselves but get the job done. The human story involves an 17-year-old woman named Rose DeWitt Bukater, played by Kate Winslet, who is sailing to what she sees as her own personal doom. She has been forced by her penniless mother to become engaged to marry a rich, super snobbed Carl Hockley, and so bitterly does she hate his prospect that she tries to kill herself by jumping from the ship. She is saved by Jack Dawson, played by Leonardo DiCaprio, a brash kid from Streetage, and of course, they will fall in love during the brief time left to them. The screenplay tells their story in a way that unabashedly shows off the ship. Jack is invited to join Rose's party at dinner in the first class dining room and later fleeing from Skull Mesremet Lovejoy. They find themselves first in the awesome engine room, the pistons as tall as churches, and then at a rousing Irish dance in the crowded steerage. At one part, Rod gives Lovejoy the finger. Did young ladies do that in 1912? Their exploration is intercut with scenes from the command deck where the captain consults and Andrews, the ship's designer, and Esme, the Vice Star Line's managing directors. Esme wants the ship to break the transatlantic speed records. He is warned that iceberg may have floated into the hazardous northern crossing but is full of danger. The Titanic can easily break the speed record but is too massive to turn quickly at high speed. There is an agonizing sequence that almost seems to play in slow motion as the ships strained and shorten to turn away from an iceberg in its path and fails. We understand exactly what is happening at the moment because of an ingenious story technique by Cameron, who frames and explains the entire voyage in a modern story. The opening shots of the real Titanic, we are told, are obtained during an expedition led by Brock Lovett, an undersea explorer. He seeks precious jewels but finds a drawing of a younger. Meanwhile, an ancient woman sees the drawing on TV and recognizes herself. This is Rose, still alive at 101. She visits Paxton's and shared her memories. I can still smell the fresh paint. And he shows her video scenes from his explorations, including a computer simulation of the Titanic last hour, which double as a briefing for the audience. By the time the ship sinks, we already know what is happening and why, and the story can focus on the character while we effortlessly follow the stage of the Titanic's sinking. Movies like this are not merely difficult to make at all, but almost impossible to make well. The technical difficulties are so daunting that it's a wonder when the filmmakers are also able to bring the drama and history into proportion. I found myself convinced by both the story and the saga. The setup of the love story is fairly routine, but the payoff, how everyone behaves as the ship is sinking, is wonderfully written. As passengers are forced to make impossible choices, even the villain, played by Zane, reveals a human element at a crucial moment. Despite everything, damn it all, he does love the girl. The image from the Titanic that has haunted me ever since I first read the story of the great ship involves the moment right after I sank. The night sea was quiet enough so that cries for help carried easily across the water to the lifeboats, which draw prudently away, still dresses up in the latest fashions. Had it froze and drawn, what an extraordinary position to find yourself in after spending all that money for a ticket on an unsinkable ship. Summary of Titanic 1997. James Cameron's epic romance and tragedy. Released in 1997, Titanic, directed by James Cameron, is an epic romance and disaster film that captured the hearts of audiences around the world. Based on the real-life sinking of the RMS Titanic during its maiden voyage in 1912, the film weaves a captivating tale of love, sacrifice, and human resilience in the face of an unimaginable tragedy. With its meticulous attention to historical details, groundbreaking special effects, and heartfelt performances, Titanic became an unprecedented cinematic phenomenon, winning numerous awards and breaking box office records. Over 2 decades after its release, Titanic remains an enduring masterpiece that continues to touch audiences and evoke powerful emotions. The film opens in the present day as a treasure hunter named Brock Lovett searches the wreckage of the RMS Titanic for a valuable necklace known as the Heart of the Ocean. During his exploration, Lovett's team discovers a sketch of a young woman wearing the necklace, which sparked the interest of an elderly woman named Rose Dawson. Claiming to be the woman in the sketch, Rose shared her story of love and tragedy aboard the Titanic. The majority of the film is set in 1912, where a young Rose DeWitt Bukater is traveling aboard the Titanic with her wealthy fiancé Carl Hockley and her controlling mother Ruth. Rose's life is devoid of happiness until she meets Jack Dawson, a penniless artist who won a ticket to the Titanic in a poker game. As Rose and Jack fall deeply in love, their passionate romance blossoms amid the opulence and grandeur of the ill-fated ship. However, their love faces numerous obstacles, including the disapproval of Ree's mother and the class distinctions that divide passengers on the ship as the Titanic collides with an iceberg and faces impending doom. Jack and Rose must fight against all odds to survive and preserve their love in the face of a catastrophic tragedy. Theme of love and sacrifice. At the heart of the Titanic lies the theme of love and sacrifice. The relationship between Rose and Jack transcends social class and scattered expectations, highlighting the transformative power of love in even the most challenging circumstances. Their love story serves as a reminder that genuine connections and empathy can overcome barriers and enrich the lives of those involved. Throughout the film, numerous acts of sacrifice are depicted, both big and small. From Jack giving up his lifeboat seat to stay with Ross to the brave action of the ship's crew and passengers during the sinking. Titanic showcases the innate resilience and compassion of humanity in times of crisis, authenticity, and historical accuracy. James Cameron's dedication to historical accuracy and attention to details in Titanic contribute to the film's authenticity, from the meticulous reconstruction of the ship's interior to the portrayal of real-life passengers and events. The film offers a window into the world of the early 20th century. The care taken to recreate the tragedy with respect to historical facts and the bravery of the individuals involved adds depth and gravitas to the narrative. Performances and character development. The performances in Titanic are nothing short of extraordinary, with Kate Winslet and Leonardo DiCaprio delivering exceptional portrayals of Rose and Jack. Winslet's performance captures the complexity of Rose's character as she evolves from a repressed young woman to a determined and courageous individual following her heart desire. DiCaprio's portrayals of Jack Dawson exudes charm, passion, and an innate joy to world that resonate with audience. Supporting actors including Billy Zane as the jealous and possessive Carl Hockley, Frances Fisher as the domineering Ruth David Bukater, and Kitty Bates as the nonsense Molly Brown, and layers of depth and complexity to the assembled cast. Directors and cinematic craftsmanship. James Cameron's directions in Titanic showcases his mystery of filmmaking on a grand scale. The seamless integration of historical drama with romance and disaster is a testament to his storytelling abilities. Cameron's decision to incorporate both fictional character and real-life events bring a sense of versatility to the narrative, allowing viewers to experience the grandeur and tragedy of the Titanic maiden voyage. The film's use of practical sets and groundbreaking special effects, particularly during the sinking sequence, earned it widespread acclaim and several Academy Awards for technical achievement. The depiction of the ship's tragic descent into the icy waters of the North Atlantic remains hauntingly realistic and visually stunning. The musical score composed by James Horner is an integral component of Titanic, adding emotional depth and resonance to the film. The hauntingly beautiful melody of My Heart Will Go On, performed by Celine Dion, became an instant classic and an inseparable from the film's emotional impact. The score's evocative theme and soaring melodies elevate the film's romantic moments while underscoring the impending tragedy. Upon its release, Titanic became a cultural phenomenon, surpassing all expectation and becoming the highest-grossing film of its time. It garnered 14 Academy Award nominations and won 11, including Best Picture and Best Director from James Cameron. Titanic left an incredible, timeless cinematic triumph that blends epic romance, historical drama, and disaster into an emotional, resonant masterpiece. James Cameron's visionary direction, coupled with extraordinary performance from the cast, creates an immersive and unforgettable experience. The film's exploration of love, sacrifice, and human resilience is the face of tragedy resonate with audience on a profound level, making Titanic a film that continues to evoke powerful emotions more than 2 decades after its release. As the shipwreck of the RMS Titanic serves as the poignant metaphor for the fleeting nature of life and love, Titanic stands as a reminder of the enduring power of human connection and the ability of cinema to touch the hearts of the millions. Titanic cast and character guides. The Titanic cast includes several Oscar winners and many other accomplished actors. The dramatic acting complements director James Cameron's technical brilliance to make Titanic one of the most successful movies ever. The period dramatic drama fictionalized the sinking of the titular ship in 1912 and the events preceding the disaster. The 11-time Oscar winner also explores class difference and capitalistic greed. Apart from the central romance between Rose and Jake, the iconic protagonist made both Kate Winslet and Leonardo DiCaprio household names, paving the way for them to appear in many more acclaimed blockbusters. As for the rest of the SAG Award nominated assembles, the 1997 movies boast equally talented acting veterans who shine in their parts even with limited screen time given the movie's massive box office success. Titanic proved to be a career high for all of its cast members. Titanic was the highest grossing film of all time until 2010, and the cast and characters continue to dominate popular culture thanks to the numerous theatrical re releases Cameron has pushed for. Here is a guide to the Titanic cast, which characters they play, and what else they are known for before and since. Kate Winslet as Rose DeWitt Bukater. Character: Rose is a 17 years old from Philadelphia who is being forced into marrying a 30 years old aristocrat so that her mother can maintain their high class status. Ever since Rose's father died, her family has been ridden with debt, but for the dreamy adventure seeking heroine, this marriage is not the solution. Her appreciation for art and adventure-seeking spirit eventually lead to her meeting her lover Jack, partially based on the real-life artist Beatrice Wood. TV shows and movies are Sense and Sensibility 1995, Miranda Dashwood, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind 2004, Clementine, Little Children 2006, Sarah Pires, The Reader 2008, Hannah Sockmates, Mayor of Easttown 2021, Mayor Shaheen. Rose is played by Kate Winslet, who earned a Best Actress's Oscar nomination for her Titanic performance. Winslet is a multi-time award nominee, earning different 7 Oscar nominations while winning once for her role in The Reader. Winslet is a multi-time award nominee, earning 7 different Oscar nominations while winning once for her role in The Reader. She was also nominated for Sense and Sensibility, Irish, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, Little Children, and Steve Jobs. The actress has also seen success on TV with Emmy wins for Mildred Pierce and Mayor of Easttown. Leonardo DiCaprio as Jack Dawson. Also leading the Titanic cast and Leonardo DiCaprio as Jack, he is a poor orphan from Wisconsin, but his lively nature encourages him to travel all over the world. Despite his financial difficulties, he is a gifted artist, as is evident from his sketch of Rose aboard the Titanic. When he and Rose fall in love, their social difference poses a challenge, yet in a truly Shakespearean manner, they continue falling for each other. The Aviator, his other TV shows and movies, the character is Howard Hughes. The Wolf of Wall Street 2013 as Jordan Belfort. The Revenant 2015 as Hugh Glass. Inception 2010 as Tom Cobb. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood 2019 as Rick Dalton. Leonardo DiCaprio got started as a child actor and his breakout came in What's Eating Gilbert Grape, in which the actor earned his first Oscar nomination at the age of 20. His stardom receives a major boost with Titanic, which he followed up with several acclaimed performances. In all, DiCaprio has a total of 7 Oscar nominations, winning of The Revenant. He was also nominated for The Aviator, Blood Diamond, The Wolf of Wall Street, and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Billy Zane as Calton Hockley. Calton Cole Hockley is a 13 years old socialite and an heir of the Pittsburgh Steel Empire who is intent on marrying Rose despite her disinterest. His antagonistic tendencies came out from her extremely possessive nature over Rose and how he looks down upon why is not as rich as him. Originally, Matthew McCarthy was to join the Titanic cast as Carl, but the role eventually went to Billy Zane. Yes, Titanic 2 exists, it is supposed to be a sequel. James Cameron Titanic is a standalone story, so the fact that 2010 movie Titanic 2 exists continue to raise question about an unknown follow-up to Rose's story every time it appears on a new streaming platform. James Cameron's name has become synonymous with big budget production, mostly from the sci-fi genre, but one of his biggest and most ambitious projects ever was Titanic. The now legendary disaster drama starring Leonardo DiCaprio and Kate Winslet, released in 1997. There's never been a sequel to James Cameron Titanic, which means there was no shortage of confusion when the 2010 movie Titanic 2 entered circulation. Based on the real-life tragedy of the RMS Titanic in 1910, Cameron's Titanic tells a fictional story led by fictional characters. Sadly, Rose and Jack's story ends in tragedy as Jack becomes one of the many victims of the sinking of the Titanic, while Rose is eventually rescued. Titanic tells a complete story and gives its main characters proper closure, even showing them reuniting in the afterlife with the rest of the passengers that died when the ship sank. So there were not any loose ends that could make way for a sequel. While the movie Titanic 2 exists, it is not linked to Cameron or a sequel to Titanic. What is Titanic 2 about? Titanic 2 is also a disaster drama movie released in 2010 and directed by Shane Van Dyke. Set in April 2012, 100 years after the tragedy of the RMS Titanic, a similar looking luxury cruise liner named RMS Titanic 2 is christened and embarks on its maiden voyage using the same real-life route as the Titanic but in reverse, from New York City to Southampton. The main characters in Titanic 2 are the ship designer Hayden Welsh and nurse Amy Main, and the reasons why Titanic 2 sinks and burns and is pretty much destroyed even worse than the original ship is all due to global warming, as an iceberg ran into the ship as a result of tsunami. By the end of Titanic 2, Hayden sacrificed himself to save Amy, who is rescued by her father, United States Coast Guard Captain James Manning, along with other injured passengers. Unsurprisingly, Titanic 2 was released direct to TV in Australia, premiere and Safi in the UK and Ireland, and was released in theatre in the US like James Cameron's original Titanic, but receives negative reviews. Throughout the performance of the main cast receives praise. It's a relatively light-hearted disaster movie that tried to do a lot with a limited budget, like most direct-to-TV feature film. And while it has a lot of heart, Titanic 2 is not a sequel to James Cameron's 1997 movie, even spiritually, and it doesn't try to be. Why James Cameron Titanic never got a sequel? Titanic 2 is not a sequel to James Cameron's Titanic, and many wonder why he never made a Titanic 2 of his own that directly follows on from his 1997 hit. On the surface, it seemed obvious that Titanic would not get a follow up. The movie depicts a historical event after all, and the titular ship sank at the end of Titanic. Jack dies, and the narrative is wrapped up neatly by the Titanic ending. Controversies about the size of a certain door aside, however, such was the success of Titanic that many viewers continue to want more regardless, meaning that there are those who'd like to see a James Cameron Titanic too. James Cameron has never publicly stated why there's no Titanic sequel. This is likely because the answer seems self explanatory from the aforementioned reason. The budget would also be a serious factor as Titanic is renowned for being one of the most expensive movies ever made, with practical effects and sets that took an inordinate amount of time and efforts to put together. As for why there's never been a sequel to Titanic that follows Rose's life after having Jack at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean, there's likely too little demand for Paramount or 20th century to option the idea of it were put forward. This is in some ways a shame because the life of Patrice Wood, the real Rose from Titanic, was incredibly fascinating. In terms of material to put together a biopic, there's more than enough to produce an engaging sequel to Titanic or a spin off around her life. However, while Titanic has an enduring legacy thanks to the story of Rose and Jack being an incredible romance story, it's primarily known because it is at its core a disaster movie. A Titanic 2 without the Titanic would not have anywhere near the blockbuster potential as a fictionalized biopic or drama based focused on Rose that draw from Patrick Wood's post Titanic life story. The other options that often been touted for Titanic 2 is of course a movie that happened at the same time as Titanic but focuses on different passengers or crew on the ship. Rose and Jack were only two among several thousand after all. One of the key reasons the real sinking of the Titanic in 1912 is still so widely studied to this day. While this obviously could work, a Titanic sequel that showed the sinking of the ship again from a different angle would not have anywhere near the same impact. James Cameron Titanic was spectacular and the scenes where the ship went under are among some of the best moments in disasters movie history. Titanic 2 would find them especially difficult to top, especially without the element of surprise Titanic had on its side. When audience saw moments like Caledon Hockley being crushed by a collapsing funnel for the first time, it's easy to see why this would forever make Titanic 2 an impossibility in James Cameron's mind. James Cameron Titanic should never get a sequel. The idea of a movie as successful as Titanic clearly not needing a sequel might seem almost strange in the 2020s when studios appear all too eager to spin out every box office or streaming win into a franchise with multiple follow-ups, spin-offs and tie-in TV shows. However, there's almost nobody out there clamoring for a Titanic sequel, and the consensus that there's no Titanic 2 needed in near universal. Pandora's box office already had been open for viewers when it comes to visual that almost deafy belief when it comes to the sinking of the HMS Titanic, and a sequel to the 1997 movie would find it more or less impossible to tap into the same level of emotional response from viewers. This is evident for several reasons beyond it simply being a story about a sinking ship, which once said ship has sunk. It's difficult to extend the narrative of. Titanic disaster movie moments are speak cinematic spectacle. They are their most jaw-dropping on the first viewing. Many sequences in Titanic, such as when the first funnel failed and crushed dozens of passengers, cannot be matched when it comes to the impact they had on viewers when witnesses for the first time. The chances that Titanic 2 would be able to top these moments are slim to None. Pandora box office already been open for viewers when it comes to visual that almost defy belief when it comes to the sinking of the HMS Titanic, and a sequel to the 1997 movie would find it more or less impossible to tap into the same level of emotional response from viewers. The chances that Titanic 2 would be able to top these moments are slim to none. Pandora's box office already been open for viewers when it comes to visuals that almost defy belief when it comes to the sinking of the HMS Titanic, and a sequel to the 1997 movie would find it more or less impossible to tap into the same level of emotional response from viewers. Titanic, what happened to the real Rose? Beatrice Wood. Based on a real life tragedy, many wonder if there is a real Rose DeWitt Bukater from the Titanic or if it was functional. Interested in the ocean and shipwreck from a young age, it was inevitable that James Cameron would one day take the HMS Titanic to the movies. The ship crashed into an iceberg during its maiden voyage in April 1911, despite being supposedly indestructible, resulting in over two-thirds of the passengers and crew losing their lives. Cameron took elements of real life for his record-breaking movie, but the real Rose from Titanic question is complicated. Rose was inspired by Beatrice Wood. He came from a wealthy traditional family of American heritage and held a passionate interest in art. Where Rose's artistic endeavors were based around collecting paintings and modeling for Jack, Beatrice was an artist herself, specializing in abstracts avant-garde that also incorporated acting and ceramics. Just as Rose and Jack share a deep appreciation of Monet in Titanic, Wood was a huge fan of the Impressionist. Cameron claimed that Wood influenced the older Rose Dawson in Titanic, played by Gloria Stott. How Titanic Rose was inspired by Beatrice Wood. Wood and Rose could both be described as progressive characters. Beatrice Wood's art was controversial and shocking for her era, and even in her later years, Wood has personified as a rebellious spirit, mentoring how Rose grew out from under the shadow of a conservative upbringing and become a more independent person. Rose viewed, or at least learned to view, those of lower social standing as equal and expresses concern about the underneath of lifeboats on board. As Rose's story is Titanic continued and pushed back on the customs of the time as well, and didn't enjoy being compromised or restricted simply because she was a woman. Compared to her despicable mother, Rose was a much more forward thinking woman. What Titanic changed about the real Rose from Titanic? For all of their similarities, however, there are also stark differences between Beatrice Wood and Rose, primarily the fact that Wood was never actually on the Titanic. She did travel abroad in Europe and all over North America, though likewise, Beatrice Wood was a perpetual artist, teaching herself of anything from painting to acting to poetry to novel writing. Versus Rose comes across as someone more interested in art than fully committed to making it herself for a living. Finally, there's also the obvious addition of Jack and Rose's love story to Titanic. While Beatrice would love different men throughout her life, many of whom broke her heart. None of the figures from her life quite line up with DiCaprio's Titanic character and his tragic passing. Rose from Titanic is not a like from like interpretation of Beatrice Wood, but there are enough interesting parallels in their histories and personalities to highlight her influences on Kate Winslet's character. The most prominent common thread between Rose and Beatrice is a furiously free spirited nature. Even before making Jack, Rose's desire to break free and experience an adventurous life of art, culture, and exploration is clear. Beatrice Wood did exactly that during her 105 years and arguably lived the exact kind of life Rose would have wanted after losing Jack. Titanic put a spotlight on Wood, and learning about her life shows that the real artist had a personality bigger than the doomed Olympic class ocean liner itself. The Titanic was not that important to the real Rose when she died. Despite inspiring Titanic, Rose Beatricewood was not interested in talking much more about the subject before her death at the age of 105. A year before her passing, Wood sat down for a rare interview via First Post, but was more interested in talking about her time in India and her involvement in various artist teams than that ill-fated voyage. Would even claim she never watched James Cameron movie despite him delivering a copy personally to her, saying she was too late in life to be sad. Beatrice's romantic life was not quite as dramatic as that of Rose story from Titanic, but it was certainly interesting as she claims, I never married the man I loved, I never loved the man I married. However, Wood did experience something close to Rose and Jack's fairy star crossed relationship after falling in love with an Indian scientist only to be kept separate by their vastly different cultures. In the end, despite the fiction, it is easy to see how Wood inspired Rose's ultimate journey in Titanic as she said. I left home, a luxurious home with $15 to be free, and I went through a few years understanding the word poverty, but I was free, and freedom means a great deal to me. Who was Beatrice Wood? The real Rose from Titanic, Beatrice Wood led a fascinating life that features more than a few similarities to Rose. Like Rose, Beatrice was born into a privileged family which she rejected as a young adult, leaving her home and pursuing a more independent life. This led to her embracing her passion for art and eventually sharing a romance with Cubist painter Marcel Duchamp. She is also credited with partially inspiring Henri Roche to write the novel Jules et Jim, which was later made into the influential French New Wave movie by Francois Truffaut. According to Titanic James Cameron illustrated screenplay, Cameron was gifted Wood's biography while writing the script and saw similarities between his character of Rose and the real-life Beatrice. Cameron said Patrice was proof that the attributes of Rose's character that I thought might have been perceived as far-fetched were not. While the character of Rose was already formed in his head to some definitions, it is amazing that Cameron found a real-life Titanic survivor who resembled her so closely. Cameron even admitted that Wood's humor helped to inform how older Rose would be played in Titanic. Why Titanic changed so much of Patrice Wood's story? It is hard to deny that Patrice Wood's life was truly cinematic one and a story that would make for a fascinating movie. However, it is not hard to see why James Cameron only used her story as inspiration for Titanic rather than shape the movie around the real Wood. There is a lot about Wood's life that makes its way into the character of Rose, and it is clear where her story inspired Cameron in creating that character. However, the simple reason that he is telling a story about the Titanic and Wood was never on board, that whistle makes it clear why a fictional character was needed. For Cameron to use Wood as a character in the movie only to invent the fact that she was on board the doomed ship would have been in poor taste and ruined a lot of the accuracy she does maintain in the film. In the end, though the lead actors of Titanic are fictional, enough elements from real life were used to shape them, including Wood's amazing life journey. It could be that Wood's story is properly adapted into a movie someday, but in the meantime, Titanic serves as a lovely and inspiring adds to this incredibly woman's life, even with all of the changes in place. Titanic true story. How much of the movie is real? The Titanic real story adaptation made for one of the most impressive cinematic achievements that viewers constantly revisit. James Cameron becomes a widely known and respected name in the film industry thanks to the Terminator franchise, but he drew a lot more attention in 1997 with Titanic, a romantic disaster movie based on the accounts of the sinking of the RMS Titanic in 1912. It was his most ambitious project up to that point. Titanic tells the story of Rose DeWitt Bukater, played by Kate Winslet, and Jack Dawson, played by Leonardo DiCaprio, two passengers from different social classes who fall in love. Titanic was a big success with both critics and viewers, becoming the highest grossing movie ever at the time. It was praised for its visuals and performances, though some criticized Rose and Jack's love story. Still, Titanic has a special place in the hearts of many and continues to be one of Cameron's best works. Although Titanic is ultimately based on a true story and even added some real life character, not everything in the movie actually happened. James Cameron had to either change, add, or embellish some details to fit the story he wanted to tell. The real life inspiration behind Rose. The real story of Titanic did not include the exact characters of Jack Dawson and Rose DeWitt, but there was some truth behind the characters. They were inspired to an extent by some real life people. Thoreau's inspiration has no connection to the actual Titanic. As revealed by Cameron, artist Patrice Wood was the inspiration behind Rose. Cameron read her autobiography during Titanic's development. Wood was a painter, sculptor, writer, and actresses from a family of wealthy socialites. As she was reading Wood's book, Cameron said that he realized it describes almost literally the character of old Rose. The movie's Rose is only a reflection of Patrice combined with many fictional elements. There is no Rose in Titanic's true story. As for Titanic's Jack, he was not inspired by anyone, but his name is similar to that of a man who was on board the Titanic. A man who signed as J. Dawson was on the Titanic, but the J stood for Joseph and he was born in Dublin. He was part of the ship's crew working as a coal trimmer. Cameron didn't know a real life Joseph Dawson existed until the script was finished, so the two Dawsons were a coincidence. Joseph Dawson's grave receives many visitors after Titanic was released. They left ceremony stubs and picture of Leonardo DiCaprio as they believe it was the resting place of Jack Dawson. The real Molly Brown. Kathy Batts' unforgettable character Molly Brown was one of the few relevant characters in Titanic based on real-life people who were actually on board. Margaret Brown was an American socialite and philanthropic but was not born into a wealthy family. Margaret married James Joseph J.J. Brown, who was not a rich man either. Still, the family acquired great wealth with his mining engineering efforts turned out to be instrumental in producing a substantial ore seam. Margaret and Brown separated in 1909 but continued to care for each other. The agreement gave her a cash settlement and monthly allowance that made it possible to continue her travels and social work. When the real Titanic hit the iceberg and began to sink, Margaret helped other passengers board lifeboats and had to be persuaded to leave the ship. In lifeboat number 6, once there, she argued that the lifeboat go back to save more people, but the crewmen opposed it. Margaret threatened to throw the crewmen on board. The sources vary whether they returned and if they found anyone alive. Molly's roles in Titanic history only grew after the disaster. Once aboard the RMS Carpathia, the ship that rescued the Titanic survivors, Margaret coordinated with other first class passengers to help survivors from the lower classes. Not only that, but the women named Unsinkable Molly Brown by the media also went on to set up a survivors community arranging burial for those lost when their bodies were recovered. According to Titanic Historical Society Don Lynch, she was ultimately robbed for the ability to put her account on record when the time came. She was also vehemently upset that she was not able to testify at the Titanic hearings at the inquest because she was a woman. Margaret Brown passed away in 1932 at 65. The Titanic really hit an iceberg. The sinking of the Titanic after hitting an iceberg is unquestionably a true story. April 14, 1912 at 11:40 p.m. ship's time, the crew spotted an iceberg and alerted the bridge. First officers William Marbot ordered the ship to be steered around the iceberg and the engines to be stopped, but there was not enough time. The ship's starboard side hit the iceberg. The hit created a series of holes below the waterline, and though the hull was not punctured, it was dented and allowed water to seep in. According to survivors, as depicted in the movie, pieces of the iceberg landed on the promenade deck. Titanic real crew was not prepared for an emergency of this magnitude, as ships were seen as unsinkable. Then the Titanic only had enough lifeboats to carry half the passengers. The crew did not know how to properly carry out an evacuation and launched many lifeboats half full with third class passengers left behind, causing many of them to become trapped below decks as the ship filled with water. A little over 2.5 hours after the Titanic hit the iceberg, the deck dipped underwater and water poured in through open hatches and grates. As its unspotted stern rose, the ship broke into two pieces. The real Titanic sank at 2:20 a.m. Most of the remaining passengers and crew were immersed in freezing water, dying within 15 to 30 minutes. As seen in the movie, the lights continued to burn until just before the ship went under, and recalled by a survivor, a series of traffic explosion occurs, probably from the boilers. The wreckage of the Titanic was founded on September 1, 1985 during an expedition led by Jean-Louis Michel and Robert Ballard, who discovered that the ship had in fact split apart. It was long delivered and sunk in one piece. Titanic covered the ship sinking in a way that was very true to life. The band continues playing. One of the most memorable moments from the Titanic true story made it into the movie as the string quartet played as the ship began to sink. In real life, the Titanic's band did continue to play, but it's unclear which was the last song they played. Survivors reported the band played Alexander's Ragtime Band and In the Shadows, and newspapers shared the final songs was Nearer My God to Thee, while survivors said it was song the autumn. Cameron's movie chose to go with the somber Nearer My God to Thee. The elderly couple. An unforgettable and heartbreaking moment in Titanic sees an elderly first class couple who stayed on the ship and embraced in beds at their room filled with water. This was also based on fact, as the couple was Massey owner Isidore Strauss and his wife Ada. They were offered a place on lifeboat number 8, but Isidore chose to stay on board as long as there were women on board. Ada refuses to leave her husband. According to witnesses, Ada told him, "We have lived together for many years. Where you go, I go." They were last seen sitting on deck, which witnesses describe as the most remarkable exhibition of love and devotion. Only Isadore's body was discovered, and more of their story was seen in the Titanic deleted scenes. Passengers were rescued from the water. As seen in Titanic, the true story of two of the 16 lifeboats returned to pick up survivors from the water, but the shock and more were too much for some and they died on the boats. The boats that returned were Lifeboat 4, led by Quartermaster Parkes, who reportedly pulled 5 people from the water, of which only 3 survived, and Lifeboat 14, headed by 5th Officer Hannah Lewis, played by Ian Gurfoot in Titanic, who was the help of a working crew of 6 men, picked up 4 people from the water. The Carpathia rescued the survivor. At around 4 am on April 15, the real Titanic survivors were rescued by the Carpathia, and the bodies of those who died on the lifeboats overnight were left on the boats and recovered sometime later. Carpathia was bound for Fiume, Austria-Hungary, now Croatia, still as it had neither the stores nor medical facilities to look after the Titanic survivor. It changed its course and returned to New York so that the survivors could be properly looked after. Many of the Titanic survivors lived for many more years while others succumbed to shock and other problems and died weeks after the disaster. After the disaster, Margaret Brown presented an award to the captain of the Carpathia for his role in saving the survivors. Was there space for Jack on the door? Titanic's two-story found many of the passengers that went into the water attempting to stay afloat on whatever they could find, which is what Jack and Rose attempted to do as well. The infamous door scene is definitely one of the saddest in Titanic and in turn raised a lot of questions. The most famous and hotly debated aspect of the movie is whether Jack could have fit on the door with Rose. Based on the size of the makeshift raft, Jack could have gotten on without the door sinking. However, it is more complicated than that. The real question is whether either of them could have still survived if they were. The longer answer, however, is more complicated than simply whether Jack and Rose could both fit on the door. The real question is whether either of them could still have survived if they were. An episode of Mythbusters recreated the scene in order to test the theory that Jack could have survived, and while the series found the he could, further experimentation was done with James Cameron himself supervising. Cameron has been asked repeatedly in interviews as to why Rose and Jack didn't share the door, and he decided to find an answer to the question 25 years after the movie hit theater. In the National Geographic serial special Titanic 25 years later with James Cameron, Santos and Cameron worked out multiple scenarios involving Jack, Rose, the door, and the freezing ocean water. While the experiments demonstrated that both of them could have been on the door, they also demonstrated that their vital organ had to be above the water line to prevent them from succumbing to hypothermia or shock. The conclusion was that Jack and Rose, if both on the door, might have survived the 30 minutes together for a lifeboat to get there, but other variables in play could have changed the outcome at any time. Cameron also pointed out in the special that what really mattered is that Jack wanted to guarantee Rose's survival. His decisions not to hop up on the door with her is to make sure she was out of the water and able to rest after a strenuous fight to survive the sinking Titanic. Cameron said, I think his thought process was I'm not going to do one thing to jeopardize her, and that's 100% in character. Despite whether Jack could have lived in real life, Cameron stuck adamantly to his choice for years, wishing that the whole debate would go away. In an interview, Cameron told BBC Radio that could Romeo have been smart and not taken the poison? Yes. Could he have decided not to bring his little dagger just in case Juliet might stab herself with it? Yes, absolutely. It sort of misses the point. It may miss the point of Titanic, but it doesn't stop the theory that Jack could have lived if Rose just had moved over a little, and that James Cameron killed Jack as deliberately as the icy Atlantic. James Cameron did his Titanic research. Regardless of how much James Cameron stuck to the Titanic's real story, it cannot be denied that the filmmaker went to great lengths to make the movie as authentic as possible. One of the early ideas Cameron had was to build an actually floatable replica of the ship to use of filming. While Cameron did it back at the $110 million cost of making it, he decided against it when he realizes he could only get one take of the sinking of the ship. In writing the screenplay for the movie, Cameron put the so-called Romeo and Juliet on the Titanic story at the center, but wanted to tribute to the crew of the ship and the people who actually lost their lives in the wreck. Cameron also put together a detailed timeline of the events to recreate the sinking as accurately as possible. He consulted historical experts to gain an understanding of how the events would have realistically unfolded from the time the ship struck the iceberg to when it finally sunk below the water's surface. Of course, it had been said the real reason Cameron made Titanic was for the opportunity to explore the shipwreck firsthand. Cameron convinced the studio to fund expedition to film the real remain of the ship at the bottom of the ocean, taking several trips down there and even colliding the filmmakers' submersible with the Titanic on an occasion. While the footage made for a breathtaking way to begin the movie, it also afforded Cameron an invaluable sense of responsibility for getting to story right in Titanic, as he explained. Titanic always had to be embellished. There is no doubt that there were interesting elements and historical figures who could have played a bigger role in Titanic to make a truly accurate account of the event. However, James Cameron was smart enough to know that adding in some infectious elements and embellishing certain facts made for a better movie. The most effective element in this regard is how Cameron created the character of Jack and Rose. Thought there may be factual inspiration for these characters, making them largely fictional characters, allowed Cameron to shape the story he wanted without being beholden to facts. For instance, Beatrice Wood's story is a fascinating one, but it doesn't make for the weeping romance story Titanic needed to be a massive blockbuster. Instead, Rose shares elements of Wood's life, but she is able to have her own story. Likewise, there may be a grave with the name of a Titanic casualty named Jack Dawson. Cameron didn't feel the need to tell his story verbatim. Cameron left these fictional characters drive the central human story of Titanic, letting them be the audience vessel through which the audience could witness the events of the sinking. This allowed him to focus on the fact of the sinking itself and how the tragedy unfolded. The mix of fact and fiction might draw some critics to eagerly point out the inaccuracies, but it was a wise move that helped make Titanic the massive blockbuster movie that it was. 8 things Titanic reveals happened to Rose after the sinking. The story of Titanic is told by old Rose DeWitt Bukater, and while the movie focuses on her time on board the ship with Jack Dawson, it also revealed a handful of things about Rose's life after the tragedy of the Titanic. Although over 2 decades have passed since the release of James Cameron's Titanic, it continues to be one of the biggest and most successful movies ever made. In addition to that, the romance between Rose and Jack on board the infamous ship is still one of the most beloved love stories in film history. Rose DeWitt Bukater, Kate Winslet, was 17 years old and she boarded the Titanic with her fiancé Cal Hockley and her mother Ruth. Rose came from a wealthy family, but they were going through a financial problem that would make them lose their upper class status, putting pressure on Rose to marry Cal. Rose's life changed after meeting Jack Dawson, and following the sinking of the Titanic, she pursued the life he showed her. Rose broke free from her family and social status after the sinking of the Titanic beginning again. Rose changed her last name to Dawson. Rose DeWitt Bukater became one of the only 6 passengers rescued from the water following the sinking of the Titanic, and the survivors were later rescued by the RMS Carpathia. Once on board the Carpathia, Rose hid among the strategic passengers to avoid Carl, who she saw walking around looking for her. When an officer asked her name, Rose changed it to Rose Dawson to honor Jack's memory and further avoid being found by Carl and Ruth. Rose changed name again years later after she got married, but she never got over Jack and their short-lived but intense romance on board the Titanic. The name change is a clever display of James Cameron throwing audience off about the tragic end to the love story. It is revealed in the early present-day scenes that Rose was lived as Rose Dawson, giving the audience the expectation that she and Jake got married after meeting on the ship. The sad reality is that she is just carrying on the memory of the love she lost. Rose never contacted her mother and Carl again. Before Rose DeWitt Bukater boarded the Titanic and met Jack, she was manipulated by everyone around her. Rose was being used by her mother to not lose their wealth and upper class status, and she was going to marry a man who was much older than her and with whom she was not in love. Titanic showed glimpses of Carl manipulating and amusing Rose, so it's not surprising that the latter decided not to contact him and her mother after the sinking of the Titanic. As mentioned above, Rose hid from Carl when he looked after her among the passengers, and it implied she never reunited with her mother again. However, and linking to the above point, it's unlikely she would have been able to hide from them for long. It has been pointed out on forums and social media that Carl and Ruth would have noticed Rose Dawson on the list of survivors, which was published days later. Thus, it's also possible that they would not have remembered Jack's last name. Rose's public image years later would have also made it difficult to hide from them, but it looks like she still managed to stay far away from them. While Carl proved himself to be a sadist man, even attempted to kill Jack and Rose as the ship sank, it is also possible that he was afraid to seek out Rose because of how she stood up to him. He was vicious to her when she was meek and submissive, but Carl is likely not as powerful as he seems when he is challenged. In any case, Rose mentioned she heard Carl killed himself after losing his fortune in the market crash of 1929. Rose became a successful actress. Rose no longer relied on her family wealth or what was left for it after the sinking of the Titanic, but she found a way to maintain herself. It revealed at the beginning of the Titanic when she is about to join Barack Lovett and his crew that Rose was an actress in the 1920s, and she continued to use the name Rose Joseph during her acting career. This, along with Rose DeWitt Bukater being registered as one of the victims of the sinking of the Titanic, made one of Lovett's crew members believed Rose was not who she claimed to be. Rose was shown to have more appreciation for art than those in her life. This was, of course, seen in her admiration of Jack's painting skills. However, there was also a Titanic deleted scene in which Rose is shown admiring paintings by an unknown Pablo Picasso, seeing the beauty in them while others, mainly Carl, dismisses them. Her embracing of the acting professions can be seen both as a further way to distance herself from those people and to stay connected to the spirit of Jack. Rose married a man named Calvert. Although Rose DeWitt Bukater changed her name to Dawson to honor Jack, used his name during her acting career, and ultimately revealed she never got over Jack, she moved on and got married at some point in her life. Rose married a man named Calvert and moved to Cedar Rapids, and that's the only information there is about her husband. Mr. Calvert passed away before Rose met Lovett and Company, but the ending of Titanic completely sold him short. Mr. Calvert never knew about Jack. He was nowhere to be seen in the photos old Rose took with her. Most heartbreaking of all, in the afterlife, right at the end of Titanic, Rose is reunited with Jack and the rest of the passengers who died in the sinking of the Titanic, and Mr. Calvert was not included in Rose's life after death. In some ways, it is understandable that the movie did not go into too much detail about Rose's later husband. The idea that she found someone later in life does lessen the impact of the seemingly once in a lifetime affair she had with Jack, so not much was needed about him. Rose had children and grandchildren. Rose not only married Mr. Calvert but she formed a family with him. Rose and Mr. Calvert had children, though it's unclear how many, and it's only mentioned that she punched out a couple of kids. Rose was also a grandmother, though how many grandchildren she had is also unknown. One of them, Elizabeth, who she called Lizzie, accompanied her to the Caldish research vessel to meet Lovett and his crew and become the only family member to learn about Jack Dawson's existence and his romance with Rose. The inclusion of Rose's family makes the absence of Rose's husband even stranger, as it is clear they had a rich life together. Yet Lizzie was there to hear the story about how the true love of her grandmother's life was a man that she had known for a few days. Further making Mr. Calvert a non-character, Lizzie doesn't seem to care too much about his revelation. Rose rode a horse on the beach. When Rose and Jack were getting to know each other, Rose mentioned she would have loved to be free like Jack and to imagine them going to the Santa Monica Pier where Jack used to make portraits for a living. Jack said they would drink cheap beer, ride the roller coaster until they got sick, and ride horses on the beach, but she had to do it like a real cowboy, none of that side saddle stuff. The photos Rose brought with her to the Caldesh are shown at the end of Titanic, and one of those sees young Rose riding a horse on the beach, like a cowboy with the pier and the roller coaster in the background, so she fulfilled one of the plans she made with Jack. It is adventures like this that show the way her life changed because of Jack's. While their romance was short lived, it is bittersweet in the end, as these images of all the things Rose did after the ship sank show how much she embraced life, which is a far cry from the woman who was thinking about jumping on board to avoid her life with Carl during the voyage. Rose flew a plane. The above mentioned photos show some of the many things Rose did and achieved after she broke free from Carl and her family following the sinking of the Titanic. One of the photos shows Rose next to a plane, showing that young Rose had the chance to fly a plane at some point. This has been interpreted as a reference to Jack and Rose's song Come Josephine in My Flying Machine, thus also linking this memory to Jack through in a more subtle and even ambitious way. Of course, flying has also long been equated with freedom as well, and Rose and Jack discusses being free. This revelation also shows that despite the trauma Rose went through with the tragic sinking of the ship, she did not live a life of fear. In the aftermath, she took risk and lived life to its fullest, refusing to be broken by the harrowing experience. Rose went ice fishing. Riding a horse on the beach like a cowboy is not the only activity Rose did after the tragedy of the Titanic that is directly linked to her story with Jack. When Rose and Jack first met, Jack mentioned going ice fishing in his hometown, and they stayed in Rose's memory for years. One of the photos at the end of Titanic shows that Rose went fishing at some point, referencing her conversation about ice fishing with Jack. Rose DeWitt Bukater honored Jack not only by taking his name, but in many of the choices she made following his death. However, these glimpses of the life Rose lived are not just a testament to the love she and Jack shared, they are also inspired by the life of the real Titanic survivor who inspired the character of Rose Wood. Like Rosewood came from a wealthy and conservative family but decided to go on her own journey in life that was filled with artistry and adventure. While she never experienced a passionate romance aboard the Titanic, Wood did survive the historic ordeal and continued to live a long, active life. Titanic true story, the real Diamond's Rose Heart of the Ocean necklace is based on. The Heart of the Ocean necklace, also known as the Titanic Diamond, is one of the most memorable features of Titanic. Bill Pullman's Brock Levitt search for the heart of the ocean necklace is the catalyst for the 3 hours epic Titanic, as it's this search that leads him to the elderly Rose Dawson Calvin and her unforgettable story. Given that Rose blue diamond necklace frames the entire movie, it's an understatement to call the Titanic diamonds important. And the key question many viewers leave Titanic with is whether or not the heart of the ocean is real. With the possible exception of the One Ring from Peter Jackson, The Lord of the Rings trilogy, the Titanic diamond is arguably the most replicated piece of cinema jewelry in history. And the thought that there's a real blue diamond of the kind seen in Titanic out there is a tantalizing prospect. Unfortunately, much like Jazz and Rose, Timeless remains the heart of the ocean necklace is fictional. However, that doesn't mean there are not any blue diamonds out there, and one diamond is particular. The Hope diamond is brought to have directly inspired Rose necklace in Titanic. The heart of the ocean diamond was not real. Titanic Heart of the Ocean Dammit was involved for the movie as a narrative device. There is not a real Titanic damage, although its story does seem plausible based on the accounts of the sinking of the RMS Titanic in 1912. Titanic tells the fictional story of Rose DeWitt Bukater and Jack Dawson, two passengers from opposite social classes who fall in love aboard the ship during its ill-fated first voyage. Rose Fancy Call Hockley serves as the main antagonist, as it's through him that an important object is introduced, the heart of the Queen. The heart of the ocean necklace was given to Rose on board the Titanic but Carl as a symbol of his love and commitment to her. As the story developed, it became very clear that Carl's intentions were not as cynical as he wanted everyone to think. The Titanic diamond was the only thing Rose was wearing when Jack sketched her, which she used to let Carl knew that she was running away with Jack. The final scene revealed that Titanic Rose had the necklace all along, and Fanny got rid of it by throwing it into the ocean. While this is an incredible love story, the story of Rose and Jack is entirely fictitious, and so is the heart of the ocean. There was never a Carl Hockley either, although he is thought to have been based on several real-life hikes. Perphel's passenger of the HMS Titanic, notably a Pittsburgh steel industry tycoon. However, there's no record of surviving passengers that survived losing a piece of jewelry as valuable as the Titanic blue diamonds. While the Titanic is considered one of the most valuable shipwrecks in the accessible ocean, its purely historical values and not because of any sunken riches like the heart of the ocean. Titanic hinged many elements of its plot around two possible real-life inspirations. One from a tragic tale of two passengers who didn't survive the sinking of the Titanic, and other well-known diamond that still exists today. The inspiration behind the heart of the ocean in Titanic. While the story of Rose and Jack is fiction, many elements in Titanic were based on real-life people, events, and more, and the heart of the ocean might have been inspired by two different diamonds. Titanic Heart of the Ocean Diamond was invented for the movie as a narrative device. There is not a real Titanic diamond, although its story does seem plausible. Based on the accounts of the sinking of the RMS Titanic in 1912, Titanic tells the fictional story of Rose, DeWitt Bukater, Kate Winslet, and Jack Dawson, Leonardo DiCaprio, two passengers from opposite social classes who fall in love aboard the ship during its ill-fated first voyage. Rose Fancy Call Hockley served as the main antagonist, and it's through him that an important object is introduced, the heart of the ocean. The heart of the ocean necklace was given to Rose on board the Titanic by Carl as a symbol of his love and commitment to her. As the story developed, it became very clear that Carl's intention was not as sincere as he wanted everyone to think. The Titanic diamond was the only thing Rose was wearing when Jack sketched her, which she used to let Carl know that she was running away with Jack. The final scene revealed that Titanic Rose had the necklace all along, with finally got rid of it by throwing it into the ocean. While this is an incredible love story, the story of Rose and Jack is entirely fictitious and so in the heart of the ocean. There was never a Call Hockley either, although he is thought to have been based on several real-life high-profile passengers of the HMS Titanic. However, there is no record of surviving passenger that survived losing a piece of jewelry as valuable as the Titanic Blue Diamond. While the Titanic is considered one of the most valuable shipwrecks in the accessible ocean, its poorly historical value and not because of the sunken riches like the heart of the ocean, Titanic hinged many elements of its plot around two possible real-life inspirations. One from a tragic tale of two passengers who didn't survive the sinking of the Titanic, and another well-known timer that still exists today. The inspiration behind the heart of the ocean in Titanic. While the story of Rose and Jack is fictional, many elements in Titanic were based on real life people, events, and more. And the heart of the ocean might have been inspired by two different diamonds. There are anecdotal reports of a sapphire necklace on board the Titanic, though it was not a part of any of the types of activities Rose and Jack got up to in crafting her final farewell to Colden Hockley. This possible inspiration for the Heart of the Ocean necklace was reportedly owned by Kate Florence Phillips and was given to her by her lover Henry Samuel Morley. The pair were secretly sailing on the Titanic with the purpose of starting a new life together in America after Morley sold two of his shops and gave the money to his wife and daughter. Kate was wearing the necklace when the Titanic sank and she made it to lifeboat number 11 while Morley, who could not swim, died in the ocean. While this first inspiration is a somber tale as tragic as Titanic itself, the second inspiration for the Heart of the Ocean necklace is a relatively well-known jewel, one that the closest equivalent to the Titanic diamond in terms of coloration, size, and value. It's believed that the heart of the ocean is based on the Hope Diamond, a blue diamond of exceptional size. The Hope Diamond is said to be cursed as it supposedly brought unhappy fates to those who wore it. And it's now an exhibition at the National Museum of Natural History in the United States. Although the heart of the ocean was not cursed and its presence aboard the Titanic had nothing to do with the ship sinking, this reputation has, of course, helped fuel speculation that there's a Hope Diamond Titanic connection. This, however, is purely an urban legend. The heart of the ocean is not the Hope Diamond, and the Hope Diamond was never poured the real Titanic. Titanic combines history and fiction, but these elements blend so perfectly at times that the audience is surprised to learn that some of them, like the heart of the ocean, don't exist. How much would the heart of the ocean be worth? Titanic famed Heart of the Ocean may not be completely real, but various replicas has been made after the movie and the Titanic diamond has been recreated for sale by jewelry companies. One of the most expensive pieces of jewelry in cinema history, Rose necklace is said to be made out of a rare blue diamond in Titanic. Blue diamond is one of the rarest colors found in the diamond family and is considered to be extremely valuable. Natural blue diamonds like the heart of the ocean come in different shades such as greenish blue, straight blue, and violet blue. Deep blue diamonds like the one in Titanic are said to be the rarest among blue diamonds, grabbing up the ticket price even meaningful higher if Titanic's meaningful heart of the ocean were real. It would be priced at around $250 to $300 million by most estimated, which are themselves often estimated using the Hope Diamond Titanic drew inspiration from. The prop necklace made for the movie, however, was put together with zirconia and white gold. The Titanic movie version of the Heart of the Ocean is priced as 8,000 via bonnet. The Heart of the Ocean from Titanic was auctioned for $2.2 million. The Heart of the Ocean necklace used in Titanic may not have been a real gem, but it still proved to be very valuable. The blue diamond Titanic props was made from cubic zirconia. However, Jubilee Esprit and Carroll created a real Heart of the Ocean after filming, including a 171 carat blue cipher and 103 diamonds. The damage was auctioned for charity and sold for $2.2 million to an anonymous bidder. The version of the Titanic diamond was worn by Celine Dion to the 1998 Oscar, where she performed My Heart Will Go On and won Best Original Song. Dion outfit at the award was designed around the necklace, including a custom blue Michelle Kors gown. Gloria Stott, who played the old version of Rose, also wore a look-alike pendant that was valued at $2 million. J. Peterman also sold a less expensive duplicate for approximately $200 million. While Heart of the Ocean Diamond is Titanic was fictional, its beautiful look was clearly an inspiration for many jewelers. How much profit Titanic made that it was the highest grossing movie by 12 years. When it was released in 1997, James Cameron's Titanic became the highest grossing movie ever made and remains one of the highest grossing films to this day. But how much of that gross was profit for the studios? A given movie's worldwide gross figures don't consider how much it costs to produce and market the film or the cut that goes to the theater exhibiting it. Titanic scored a global gross of more than $1.8 billion during its initial run, and that total has increased to $2.2 billion with subsequent re-release. After Titanic surpassed Jurassic Park to become the highest grossing movie of all time, it held the record for 10 years until it was topped by Cameron's own Avatar, which was later topped by Avengers Endgame. At the time, a big budget dramatization of the sinking of the Titanic was thought to be a poor fire box office bomb. But Titanic still holds the number 4 spot on the list of the highest grossing movies and remains one of Hollywood's more impressive success stories. How much of Titanic historical gross went back to the studios as profit? Titanic made an estimated profit of $1.4 billion at the box office. Titanic netted an estimated profit of $1.4 billion with a whopping budget of $210,337,000,000 in today's dollar. Titanic was the most expensive film ever made at the time of its release. The film's lifetime gross of $2.2 billion is divided into $1.8 billion from its original theatrical run and $400 million from its re-releases. Adjusted for inflation, Titanic has earned around $3.33 billion. The studios behind Titanic, 20th Century Fox and Paramount Pictures, who split the right to the film, spent approximately $150 million on marketing. The general rule of thumb is that 50% of box office receipts go to the theater showing the movie and the other 50% comes back to the producers. But Titanic stays in theater a lot longer than the average movie, and the longer a movie stays in theaters, the bigger the distributor's box office percentage becomes. Rather than the standard 50%, Fox and Paramount receives around 58% of Titanic box office revenue. The Hollywood Reporter estimates that the studio made $1.4 billion, $1.9 million today in profit from Titanic. How Titanic box office profit compares to James Cameron's other movies. Titanic is not Cameron's only commercial hit. Almost all of his other movies have made blockbuster numbers at the box office. According to the numbers, when Titanic first hit theaters, it was Cameron's highest grossing movie by far, but his previous films had all been hit except for The Abyss, which underperformed. Aliens made $183 million, True Lies made $365 million, and Terminator 2 Judgment Day made $515 million. Cameron eventually topped Titanic gross with Avatar $2.9 billion and Avatar The Way of Water $2.3 billion. Titanic ending. What happened to Jack and Rose? James Cameron's 1997 movie bagged itself 11 Academy Awards including Best Picture when it released. Using a combination of fake and real characters from the doomed vessel, Kate Winslet and Leonardo DiCaprio star as fictionalized characters on board the Titanic in this romantic historical drama. The story is split between two different time periods with the first in the heart of 1996. A research vessel begins exploring the wreckage of the Titanic led by Brock Lovett and his team. They recover a safe in the hopes of it containing a necklace with a large rare diamond known as the Heart of the Ocean. Instead, they find a drawing of a young woman wearing that very necklace. The sketch is dating April 14, 1912, the same day the Titanic hit the iceberg. Rose rings the crew, informing them she is the one from the drawing. She is brought aboard and recounts her tale of how she met Jack, Leonardo DiCaprio, and the events that led to the ship sinking. From here, we cut back to 1912 as we see a 17-year-old Rose DeWitt Bukater board the HMS Titanic, bound of America, but as she says herself, she liked the Titanic to slave ship, taking her away in chains to marry Colton Cal Hockley. When Rose decided to commit suicide one night and jump off the back of the ship, she ends up befriending Jack Dawson, a poor young artist who won a third-class ticket to the Titanic in a poker game. Why does Rose write mocking note to Carl after the trying? As Jack and Rose cross closer together, Rose brings Jack to her stateroom and pays him to sketch her picture wearing only the Heart of the Ocean necklace. Something Carl gifted her earlier in the movie. She never particularly liked wearing it, claiming it was bulky and heavy, ironically symbolizing her own heavy heart at his proposed marriage. After drying her sketch, Rose leaves the drawing inside the safe alongside the diamond and a note reading, "Darling, now you can keep us both locked in your safe." This is, of course, her proverbial way of saying to Carl and his controlling ways, with the safe serving as a metaphor of Rose's life period to intrigue the Titanic. This is her way of liberating herself thanks to Jack's help. After the pair make love to one another, they head up on deck and watch the ship's collision with the iceberg, overhearing officers discussing how serious the situation is. While this is going on, Carl returns to find Jack's sketch and Rose's note. He has Lovejoy slip the Heart of the Ocean necklace into Jack's coat, thus affirming him as a thief. Unfortunately, he is confined in the master at arms office down below. Carl is there to see Jack off, taking the necklace for himself and hitting Jack for good measures. How does Jack escape? Rose heads off and finds Jack, freeing him from his handcuffs with an axe. After a couple of questionable practice shots, she miraculously breaks his bonds. The pair manage to make it back on deck again, where Carl catches up with them both. An opportunity for Rose to leave presents itself, with Carl promising that they will be following soon in their own lifeboat. They will not, of course, as the deal is for Carl only, and Jack is destined to stay on the ship and die. Rose decided at the last minute not to leave and scramble back on board the boat, but the last straw for Carl, who grabs Lovejoy pistols and chases them into the floating dining room in first class when they disappear out of view. Carl realizes with bitter irony that Rose has actually been wearing Carl's coat the whole time, the one with the Heart of the Ocean inside. Carl decided to abandon ship and does so by snatching up a crying child and posing as her concerned father. The pair manage to get aboard a lifeboat and survive, although Carl does get a couple of dirty looks from the officers on board. With time running out and the ship quickly filling with water, Jack and Rose return to the boat deck. All the lifeboats are gone and the ship's stern is starting to rise. They desperately cling to the stern rail, where they watch the infamous fan guy who falls and bounces off the ship's propellers. The ship breaks in half, giving the pair a couple of precious moments before they both fail into the freezing water together. The Titanic forever lost to the depth of the ocean. In the freezing water, Rose and Jack are momentarily separated before deciding to leave the crowd of people scrambling for help. Together, they find a floating door and attempt to survive. Jack and Rose both try to get on it together, but their combined weight buckle it. We actually see them both attempting his once. I mean, they could have tried a few times after all, but in the end, Jack is confined to his fate. He makes the decision to sacrifice his own life so Rose can live hers. So, in the end, Jack holds into the edge of the door while Rose lies on her back. Now, they are the subject of hypothermia and a couple of contrivances, but ignoring that, time passes and Rose is eventually saved by a returning lifeboat. As the film reaches its climax, the survivors from the Titanic are saved by the RMS Carpathia, who rescue the survivors. Rose notices Carl wandering around trying to find her, but she managed to stay hidden. That's the last we see of Carl home. We learn courtesy of Rose's narration in the present time actually commits suicide after losing his fortune in the Wall Street crash of 1929. In the theatrical release, we'll get to the alternate scenes shortly. Lovett decided to give up searching for the heart of the ocean, believing it's a lost cause. He finally understands the emotional turmoil his horrific accident had and decided to let the past rest. However, alone on the strand that night, Rose takes out the heart of the ocean from her pocket. She had it with her the whole time. She drops it into the sea, allowing it to be lost alongside the wreckage, safe in the knowledge with no one will find it, at least not anything soon. That night, Rose heads back to her room and sleeps peacefully, but does she pass away in her sleep or is she still alive? It's a subjective scene with Cameron herself leaving this on deliberately ambitious. The script simply states she is very still and could be sleeping or something else. With the familiar music theme playing, the camera pans across various pictures of Rose in her life, ironically taking part in all the different activities she and Jack promised one another they'd do. From horse riding through to raising a family, Rose has made the most of her life, and throwing the heart of the ocean in the sea feels like her final bit of closure from a very fulfilling life. Not only that, but Jack also promised Rose while they were both freezing outside that she is going to die an old lady warm in her bed. This only reinforces the idea that she is dead. However, on the other side of the debate, you could argue that Rose has not passes away. She's lived a long, happy life and is married and with kids. But instead of reaching the afterlife with her loving family, she ends up with a man who changed her life back when she was a teenager, someone she only knew for a weekend. Why would she give up all that to be in the afterlife with Jack? We will let you be the judge of which side of the argument you fall on. Given Titanic is a romantic drama, we are more inclined to say it's the former. As the film closes out, we cut to the Titanic once more as Rose and Jack are reunited together at the grand staircase, applauded by all those who died on the ship. The alternate ending is different, and by different we mean absolutely dreadful. Here, the ending is changed to see Lizzie spotted his grandmother climbed up on the railings. She rushed forward with Brock, where Rose tells them not to get any closer. She holds up the heart of the ocean and threatens to drop it. You heard that the whole time, Ross asked incredulously. Rose explained she did think about sailing the Diamond but could not do it given it made her think of Carl. Rose's true purpose on his trip was to put it, the heart of the ocean, back where it belongs. Brock pleads with Rose to let him hold the Diamond just once, but Rose tells Brock that he looks for treasure in the wrong places, telling him that life is priceless and they should make each day count.
Rose tosses the damn overboard while Brock James shows up and watches on incredulously. The same scene after Jim hitting the water is used before we cut back to Brock and Rose. The former loves as his team before asking Lizzie to dance. Let's be glad this didn't make it into the final cut as the original is pretty pitch perfect for the messaging. One Rose details all but confirms the sad Titanic ending theory. Titanic told the unforgettable love story of Rose, played by Kate Winslet, and Jack Leonardo DiCaprio, with the ending leaving viewers questioning what was happening. But one detail in Rose clauses confirmed the saddest theory about Titanic's ending. James Cameron's Titanic took the real-life tragedy of the RMS Titanic to tell the fictional story of a first-class young woman and a third-class young man aboard the ship who against all odds fell in love and stayed together during the sinking of the ship, thought their romance was doomed to tragedy. Titanic is told by old Rose as she shared her experience on board the ship during its tragic maiden voyage, and it's the first time she openly talked about Jack and their short-lived but passionate romance. At the end of Titanic, it's revealed old Rose had the heart of the ocean with her the entire time and decided to drop it into the ocean over the side of the shipwreck, not revealing to treasure hunter Brock Lovett nor to her family that she kept the diamond for decades. Titanic ends with old Rose asleep with the camera going back to the shipwreck as it slowly goes back to how it was with every single details in place. As Rose enters the first class section and meets Jack at the grand staircase, and one detail in Rose dress confirmed that was the moment Rose died. Rose dress at the end of the Titanic confirms she is in heaven. In the final scene of Titanic, as the camera enters the first class section with Rose, she is welcomed by all the passengers who died in the sinking of the Titanic, and there's a no social class distinction this time. Rose is wearing a white dress with a white match-like top and skirt with gems from top to bottom, and as pointed out by viewers on Reddit and more, it's a white version of the dress she wore at dinner when Jack was invited to the first class aside of the ship. Rose famously met Jack at the grand staircase when she arrived, and again after dinner when she asked her if she wanted to go to a third class party with him. Rose wearing a white version of that specific dress at the end of Titanic is seen as a symbol of her entering heaven at that moment. This is why she reunites with Jack and is welcomed by the rest of the passenger, with some of those closest to her like Thomas Andrews, her maid Trudy, and Jack's best girl Cora at the front of the crowd. The scene and Rose dress also bring Jack and Rose story to full circle, giving a new meaning to Jack Make It Count. Meet me at the clock note from the first class dinner scene where Rose was wearing the red version of the dress, as it shows Rose fulfilling the promise of not letting go and meeting him again. Titanic gave a heart-working ending to Rose and Jax by having them reunite, but where exactly the movie's final scene take place has made way for a lot of debate over the years. Among the most popular interpretation of Titanic ending is that Rose is dreaming after telling her whole story to Lovett and her crew, symbolizing how she has broken free from the secret and so can reunite with Jack, even if just in dreams. The most accepted interpretation, however, is that about Rose dying at the end of Titanic and arriving at the afterlife with Jack and the rest of the passengers, and if so, the white dress hints at her going to heaven with everyone else. Titanic 7 characters based on real people and 7 who are completely fictional. The sinking of the Titanic on April 14, 1912 is displayed on screen in as Titanic perfectly captures the harrowing maiden journey of the world's most famous ocean liner through the compelling narratives of its passengers. The character has position to tell his tale where comprised of both fictional and real historical figures. Some of whom survives and some of whom joined the 1517 poor souls at the bottom of the ocean. The story followed the ill-fated romance of Jack, Leonardo DiCaprio and Rose Kate Winslet, but a large ensemble filled out the movie's narrative. James Cameron's disaster epic Titanic reignited the passion the public had for the drama, romance, and bone-chilling thrill associated with the historical event. The movie raises questions about the character for the audience through did everyone named Jack Dawson really win ticket to make the crossing from Captain Edward Smith and socialite Molly Brown to passengers like Fabrizio De Rossi and Tommy Ryan comparison selected a colorful mixture of real and fictional character to tell his story. Fictional character in Titanic. Rose arrogant and condescending fancy Colston Hockley was not a real person on board the Titanic, but this fictional character was in keeping with the roster of wealthy elites who charted passage to New York City. As actor Billy Zane noted, Cole Hockley was a product of his time and designed by Cameron to be the sharpest point of love triangle. The stateroom that he booked for himself and Rose would have been one of the most luxurious offered to the son of Nathan Hockley at a cost of $4,000 at the time Titanic set sail, the equivalent to a whopping $69,000 today. In Carl's world, he and Rose were considered royalty. Carl returned his nose up at those not traveling in first class and had no patience for Rose speaking her mind. As a wealthy man of privilege, he expected the women in his life to follow his orders. Spicer Lovejoy was Carl Hockley's personal valet as well as his bodyguard. It makes sense that Carl is a fictional character created for the movie. So is Lovejoy. For a fictional character, James Cameron gave him an extensive biography. He had been hired by Carl's father, Nathan Hockley, to watch over his son. After leaving his position as a Pinkerton detective and police constable, his period field work made him very prospective. He noticed Jack Dawson could not possibly have had time to remove his shoes and his coat before trying to save Rose's life when she actually intended to leap from the stern of the ship. He carried a Colt M1911 with specific engraving which he used to hunt Jack and Rose through the bows of the ship at Carl's request. He was a loyal employee. Many of the movie's main characters are fictional creations, while the supporting cast filled in around them are inspired by real passengers. Rose's social climbing mother was entirely fictional, but she might as well have been any number of women of the era who, impoverished by the fictional choices of their husbands, were forced to make prudent matches, such as pursuing her daughter on Colleton Hockley with their offspring to score their fictional future. Ruth could not understand why her daughter Rose refused to get into a lifeboat with her in order to stay by Jack's side. Meanwhile, when Ira Foster, the real owner of Mackie Departure Store, could not get in one, his wife left from hers to be with him. They passed away together in their cabin, which was the basis of the touching scene in the films depicting two elderly people sharing their last moments together. Rose DeWitt Bukater may not have been a real person, but she was certainly the picture of a young, aristocratic lady who boarded the Titanic expecting to sail to New York City in the lap of luxury. Historical records indicate third-class passengers Rhoda Abbott was the only female survivor to be pulled from the water after the Titanic sank. Rose's high-minded ideas may have been at odds with how ladies behaved in the early 20th century, but they have gave her character the sort of spirit that captured the essence of what Titanic offered to many passengers: the chance for a new life and a new future. Through her time on the vessels might have been traumatic, her whirlwind relationship with Jack gave her the courage to start a new life for herself after surviving the sinking, and the movie hints at a rich and full life for her with the images and article showcases in the present day. Intrepid dreamer Jack Dawson was not aboard the Titanic when it set sails, nor was there by any account of a charming but penniless artist embarking on a love affair with a woman from first class. First class passengers were sequestered from third class passengers to mitigate the spread of disease as well as societal prudence. Jack being able to dine with Rose and visit her room would have been nearly impossible on the ship, as would her dancing blue deck. According to the harrowing account of survivor Jack Caesar in his book A Survivor Tale, only one out of every 36 people who went into the Farragut water was pulled from them. His recollection about the ship's journey both before and after it sank helped Cameron piece together what life was like on board the world's grandest vessel and helped to contribute to Jack's story. When Jack Dawson wins a lucky hand of poker, he and his friend Fabrizio de Rossi suddenly find themselves with ticket to sail to America aboard the Titanic, and they could not be more thrilled. I go to America, Fabrizio cries, unbothered by the fact that he will be traveling as a third class passenger. He sees the trip as the first step toward the new American dream. Fabrizio might not have been a real person, but there were plenty of Italian immigrants just like him in Southampton who boarded the Titanic filled with dreams of what their lives would be like once they reached the United States. Unfortunately, just like Fabrizio, they would never see their dreams one come true because so many of the third class passengers went down with the ship or didn't survive the frozen water. Tommy Ryan is not someone Jack and Fabrizio know before boarding the ship. Instead, he befriended Jack Dawson and Fabrizio de Rossi upon deck when he admired Jack's drawings. Tommy also cited the inspiring artist for having feeling about a first-class passenger. He did, however, invite them to participate in a party thrown by the Irish passengers in Streetage. It's at Tommy's party that Rose, shown off her dancing skill and finally gets to be free for the confines of her mother and call. Though Tommy was not a real person aboard the Titanic, he was like many of the Irish passengers he symbolized, proud of the Irish heritage and the fact that 15,000 Irishmen built the ship in Belfast. His senseless death at Williams Mardochans deeply affected everyone around him and instantly raised the stakes of an already perilous situation. Real people who inspired Titanic character. The deplorable J. Bruce Ismay, played with stuffy malevolence by Jonathan Hyde, was the managing director and chairman of the White Star Line and famously declared the ship to be unsinkable. As the ship was actually sinkable, he jumped into one of the few available lifeboats and was rowed to safety. Ismay was called to testify before the U.S. Senate after the Titanic sinks to provide his account of the disaster. The press harshly criticized Ismay for saving himself when there were women and children still on board. Despite the fact that he was asked to help row the lifeboat, only 706 passengers and crewmen survived the Titanic sinking. 60% of the survivors were first-class passengers, of which Ismay was one, which was more than the combined total of second and third-class passengers. The indomitable Kathy Bates brought her charisma and work to make the already larger-than-life Margaret Brown even more memorable. She was not born into wealth and she did not marry into it. Rather, her wealth came as a result of her husband's mining business taking off, pushing them both into a whole new social bracket. While she enjoyed society, he did not, and they separated 3 years before her becoming a passenger on the Titanic. He provided her with a monthly allowance so she could continue to travel and engage in social work. The robust socialite became known as the unsinkable Molly Brown after surviving the 1912 disaster, and she actually had quite the resemblance to Bates. Molly Brown gave an emotional plea for her lifeboat to go back and try to rescue passengers bobbing in the water after the ship sank. But records cannot confirm with certainty if it was one of the lifeboat to return. She went on to become a social activist and a US Senate candidate. Captain Edward Smith was a renowned seaman, and the voyage of the Titanic was to be the last he made before retiring. He had been working for White Star since 1880. Historical accounts are muddled about whether or not he tried to avoid any ice danger by altering Titanic course southward after receiving iceberg warnings from other ships. If he did, his attempts came too late to make a difference. Years before the sinking of the Titanic, Captain Smith was actually the commanding officer on another troubled White Star Line ship, the Olympic. The Olympic collided with a British warship because the Olympic was so big and its engine so powerful it sucked the other ship into its wake.